Good afternoon or good evening, fellow Toastmasters. We all know that smoking causes cancer. However, it took science quite a long time to get to that conclusion. It's easy enough to find a pattern between smoking and cancer. It's that folks who smoke tend to get cancer at higher rates than folks who don't smoke. However, just because these two things are related doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the other. We know better, though. Today we know that smoking does cause cancer. However, who's to say that cancer doesn't cause smoking? This was an argument by a famous professor, R.A. Fisher, who was a professor of genetics in the 1950s, a pioneer of statistics. He actually made a very compelling argument that, as a geneticist, that some folks may have a gene in their bodies that causes cancer, and it causes inflammation, this discomfort in someone's body over time that eventually goes into the cancer. And this inflammation causes them to seek relief for it via smoking. Cancer causes smoking. But his argument was bigger than that. It wasn't just the mechanism for what caused it. It was just that at the time in the 1950s, folks didn't understand, scientists hadn't reached the conclusion for what actually caused the cancer. Just because people who smoke tended to get cancer doesn't mean that one caused the other. And it brings a very compelling argument, although he reached the wrong conclusion, a very compelling argument for correlation does not imply causation. But what does that phrase even mean? Correlation is a word that describes a pattern when two things happen in tandem. For example, if you see dark clouds outside, you tend to think, oh, it might rain. Likewise, if you leave milk in the fridge too long, it tends to go bad. Both of these are a specific type of correlation that have a cause and effect relationship. For example, clouds become dark when they contain extra moisture, which is released into the atmosphere and onto the earth as rain. A cause and effect. Same story with milk in the fridge. Too much bacteria in there, letting it sit in there too long, causes the milk to go bad. However, not all correlations have that cause and effect relationship. I found an interesting statistic recently on the internet that said the per capita consumption of margarine is highly correlated with the divorce rate in the state of Maine. Now, does that actually mean I should stop eating margarine for the sanctity and safety of my marriage? Probably not. I think I'm going to hold on to that margarine. Now, we may see that kind of fact and realize, oh, these two things may be related to each other, but that doesn't mean I have to stop doing X to stop Y from happening. Let's go back to Fisher for a minute. In his mind, his argument was just because you see this relationship between smoking and cancer doesn't mean that he should stop smoking. I'll add a little note. Professor Fisher was a heavy pipe smoker. He was also employed by a tobacco company. I'm saying correlation doesn't imply causation, but who knows why he was making this argument. Still a good argument. Now, in his mind, cigarettes were like margarine, and cancer was like divorce. These two things seem to be related, but again, in the 1950s, scientists didn't actually know why they were related, just that they were related. It took years of studies and research and mounting evidence in order to understand this relationship in more detail. It wasn't enough to say people who smoke tend to get cancer more often. There were additional studies of What happens to people who quit smoking? They tend to get cancer less often than people who continue to smoke. What happens to people who smoke more heavily than others? They tend to get cancer, more types of cancer, and more cancer more often than people who smoke less. And finally, decades after this original argument, biologists understood the mechanism inside the body that causes lung cells to go bad due to smoke inhalation, repeated smoke inhalation over years and decades. Today we know that cancer causes smoking. Today we know smoking causes cancer. Today we know smoking causes cancer, but that wasn't an easy conclusion to draw. It's one thing to say two things are related to each other, two things happen at the same time, but it's a whole lot more difficult to understand why one causes the other. It requires years of specialized research, years of advanced experiments and collaboration and statistics, and more difficult scientific and economic techniques to reach that conclusion. In essence, correlation may not imply causation, but still be careful with correlation may not imply causation, but still be careful with cigarettes and margarine. Thank you very much.